There is a room where nothing can hurt you. The food arrives on time, the temperature never changes. No one can threaten you, rob you, or lay a hand on you. It is, by every measure we normally use, safe. We also know that it breaks people. Reliably. On a timeline. And for a long time, nobody could explain why, because nothing was being done to them. So what exactly is the injury? And what is causing it? Let's start in 1951, because the first people who went into a room like this were not prisoners. They were volunteers, and they were being paid very well to be there. At McGill University in Montreal, a psychologist named Donald Hebb ran an experiment funded by the Canadian Defense Department. He recruited healthy male college students and offered them $20 a day to lie on a bed and do nothing at all. $20 a day in 1951 was roughly double what a student could earn doing anything else. The job was simple. Lie down. Stay there. Leave whenever you want. They wore translucent goggles that let light through but blocked every shape. Cardboard tubes covered their arms and cotton gloves covered their hands so they could not feel texture. A constant hum covered sound. They were fed. They were allowed to use the bathroom. Then they went back to the bed. Hebb expected them to last for weeks. Almost none of them made it past 2 or 3 days. Not because it hurt, because they could not stand it. Within hours, they couldn't hold a thought in a straight line. Simple arithmetic became difficult. Then the hallucinations started. Dots and lines first, then repeating patterns like wallpaper, then full scenes. One participant watched a row of squirrels march past with sacks over their shoulders. Another described prehistoric animals walking through a jungle. Another saw a procession of eyeglasses. These were healthy young men lying in a lit room on a bed being paid, free to walk out at any moment. Nothing had been done to them. Something had been taken away. But Hebb had removed the whole world. And what came next was stranger, because the next man removed almost nothing. The question underneath all of this is narrower than sensory deprivation. What happens if you take away only the people? In 1972, a French scientist named Michel Siffre climbed down into a cave in Texas and stayed there for 6 months. He was not deprived of anything else. He had a tent, a bed, food, books, records, electric light, and a telephone line to a support team on the surface that he could use whenever he wanted. He was not a prisoner. He could have climbed out on any day of those 6 months. The only thing missing was other people. The first weeks went fine. Then his record player broke. Then his equipment started failing. By the 3rd month, his memory had begun to come apart in ways he couldn't explain to the team above him. He would start a sentence in his logbook and lose the end of it. He described his mind as fogged and his thoughts as impossible to string together. Then a mouse appeared in the cave. Siffre spent days trying to befriend it. He left crumbs, he waited, he gave it a name. Eventually he tried to trap it under a dish so he could keep it, and he crushed it by accident. He wrote that it was the worst moment of the entire 6 months. A man who had voluntarily buried himself underground for half a year was undone by a dead mouse, because it was the only other living thing down there. And that is a man who chose it, who was comfortable, and who could leave. And here is where it gets worse. Now, take away the choice. In the 1980s, a psychiatrist named Stuart Grassian was asked to evaluate prisoners held in solitary confinement in a Massachusetts state prison. He interviewed them individually, expecting to find the ordinary range of psychiatric conditions you would find in any population. Instead, he found the same cluster of symptoms over and over in men who had nothing else in common. Hypersensitivity to noise and light to the point where a set of keys down the hall was unbearable. Perceptual distortions, hallucinations, panic attacks, intrusive thoughts they could not stop, paranoia, a total loss of impulse control, an inability to concentrate or remember, so severe that some of them could no longer read. Grassian's conclusion was the part that mattered. He argued this was not a mental illness. The pattern didn't match depression or schizophrenia or any functional psychiatric disorder. It matched delirium. Delirium is what you see in fever, in poisoning, in head injury, in organ failure. It is an acute organic brain state. It means the physical machinery is malfunctioning. These men were not becoming mentally ill. Their brains were failing in the way a brain fails when something is medically wrong with it. And we can now measure some of that. In 2019, a team led by Alexander Stahn published a study in the New England Journal of Medicine. They scanned the brains of 9 crew members before and after 14 months at a research station in Antarctica. Small team, no new faces, no way out for most of the year. Otherwise, well-fed, warm, safe, and busy. When they came back, the dentate gyrus in their brains had shrunk by roughly 7%. That structure is the gateway for new memories. It's the same region that isn't finished wiring in a human infant, which is part of why you can't remember being one. 14 months of isolation measurably reduced it in healthy adults. Their levels of BDNF, a protein the brain uses to build and maintain connections, dropped too. And they stayed low for months after the crew came home. That's the structure. Here's the mechanism. In 2003 at UCLA, a neuroscientist named Naomi Eisenberger put people in a brain scanner and had them play a simple ball-tossing game with 2 other players. Partway through, the other players stopped throwing them the ball. That's it. That's the whole cruelty. The scans lit up the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. That is the region that processes the distress of physical pain. 7 years later, another group tested the obvious follow-up question. They gave people ordinary acetaminophen, the painkiller in your medicine cabinet, every day for 3 weeks and tracked their reported hurt feelings. The hurt feelings went down. Your brain does not have a separate system for social pain. It runs it on the hardware built for injury. So here's where the usual explanation falls apart. The popular version is that solitary confinement drives people mad because there's nothing to do, that it's boredom taken to an extreme, that a strong enough mind could hold out. That isn't what any of this shows. Hebb's students had nothing to do and lasted 2 days. Siffre had books, music, light, and a phone, and lost his memory anyway. The Antarctic crews were busy the entire time and came home with less brain tissue. So what is the variable? Not stimulation, people. For 300,000 years, a human being alone was a human being about to die. Your ancestors survived inside a circle of about 30 feet, around a fire with 25 other people. Inside that circle, predators didn't come. Outside it, you were food. There was no version of a human life where being alone was survivable, so your body never evolved a setting for it. So it doesn't treat isolation as sadness, it treats it as an emergency. Cortisol rises, inflammatory genes switch on, the ones that prepare the body for a wound, because historically alone meant a wound was coming. Threat detection turns all the way up, which is why the sound of keys becomes unbearable. The body is bracing for an attack that never arrives, and it will not stop bracing because from its perspective, the danger is still out there. That's the injury, not boredom. A defensive program with no off switch, running against nothing for weeks. In 2015, the United Nations set the line at 15 days. Past 15 consecutive days, the changes start becoming permanent, and it stops being confinement and starts being torture. 15 days. Now think about your last month. You can order food without speaking. You can work without a room. You can fill every hour with voices that can't hear you back. You can go a full week now without one unplanned conversation, without touching another person, without anyone noticing you were gone. You are not being punished. You have the door code. You chose all of it, and most of it was reasonable. But the circuitry underneath doesn't know that you chose it. It only knows how many people are in the room, and it has been counting the whole time. The room was built to hold people who couldn't leave. You built a version you can leave whenever you want. Most nights you don't.